go. All right, everybody. We're ready to go for some sort of episode in the 60s. We've got our new content creator, Mosiah. We're gonna have to take a picture with him and get him on camera for this thumbnail of this episode because he has the sweetest mustache that you'll ever see. So that was how he got the job. Was he walked in as a creative with a fancy mustache like that and those glasses, and I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing. This guy's a creative right here. You profiled him as somebody very creative. I did. I stereotyped him as a creative. So happy to get going again. Consistently, we've got a couple of episodes that we've shot in the can that we'll be dropping out, and just happy to start getting on to all the news. Seems like things keep dropping, and we're in the heat of AEP. We're about 8-9 days in. And it is, October 25th. And here in about a week or two, my sources tell me that we're going to be getting the new call letter for 2026 from CMS. So just when we all got to work in AEP, it's going to be an SMF. Right back at it. Yeah, well, this will be, hopefully it'll be a parting gift. I really can't imagine that they're going to jam a bunch more stuff in. They're going to swing for the fences. Well, we'll see. Hopefully, what I'm saying is, I hope that it clarifies a lot of things in the industry that have been kind of out there swirling, because there is still a lot of uncertainty going into 2025, which is part of what we wanted to talk about today. I'll tell you, lawyers have been doing great in all of it, between murkiness and overreach in the call letter and not having clarity, and the lawyers love it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, we kind of wanted to set, we're 8-9 days into AEP, and as we've been saying, pretty consistently throughout the year, carriers all kind of know how they're doing and where they're going to win, and we kind of have the same kind of data and information right now to know how our AEP is shaping up. So, just to kind of jump right into it, for us, for Agent Boost, we're up big time as far as like overall sales, overall enrollments. We're seeing a trend up of over 200% year over year with our enrollments across all channels, and candidly, our goal was 40%. When we kind of sit down and go, hey, what would be great success and what would we want to see? 40% for us was like, that would be huge, and instead of that, we're looking at over 200%. Yeah, so I've frankly been pretty happy, pretty excited this past week as we're starting to see some of the fruits of our efforts paying off this year, and some of the sales channels and teams that we've been building really starting to pay off, and some of these agents starting to come into alignment and really start executing and listen to the things that we've been setting forth. And I think we're trending to have a really, really fantastic AEP. Yeah, and I would also I'm going to shoot my shot and put my plug in, which I don't do very often, but if you listen to this and you're going, well, my sales aren't up that much, I don't have very good strategy, I'm not executing that way, maybe you should join a winning team. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, absolutely. To that point, this is the time of year where I kind of shift back into recruiting mode, with our teams here. We start talking about, what we're going to change. We do our roadmap. So Dan and I will sit down over the next week or 10 days. We'll go over, our 2024 roadmap, what we executed on, what we didn't, make our tweaks, our adjustments for going into next year. And as we were kind of starting that early process, we were, we fared pretty well. We executed on a lot of the about initiatives. 80% of what we scoped out. So about from when we had our strategic meeting last year and said, hey, let's look forward at next year. How are we going to grow the business? Where's the emphasis going to be? What do we want to execute on? How do we prioritize all these initiatives? We actually ended up executing on about 80% of them, which I'm actually really happy about. Yeah, and so that's just, wherever you're at in your business, whether you're an independent agent, and that was kind of what I was getting around to saying is I'm already having a lot of people, agents, agencies reaching out, because what happens is AEP starts and it's frustrating, or it's not going the way they thought, or there are things that were promised to them are not being delivered, and inevitably we get a lot of agents and agencies reaching out right around this time of year. So
our onboarding and our recruiting actually kind of goes crazy end of the year.
Yep.
And just as a business principle, guys, if you're a solo producing agent or you're an agency owner, don't wait until, the actual end of the year. Take this time to start course correcting where you need to be so you can actually start the year running and hitting the ground. I think a lot of people get stuck in this. Well, I'll wait till the end of Q4 and then I'll go into the holiday season and then the year will kick off. Then I'll kind of figure out what I need to do to change and how I can grow my business. And you've already wasted 3 months.
And then by the time it's halfway through OEP, they have a plan.
Yeah.
No, but I would say I think that's going to be one of our podcast episodes that we're going to be doing here in the next couple of weeks, is just talking about how we go through and strategically roadmap and plan out our business and forecast. I think that would be very enlightening for a lot of people listening, because this year, the one thing I have done is actually gotten very granular to each different line of business and having very, very specific goals to growth on not only like employee headcount to independent agents tied to it and company resources tied to that, as far as production and sales numbers and revenue. So it's kind of all very specifically been mapped out to all those different lines of business, and again, how we're going to execute and do that. And so I think that that would be very helpful for you to kind of understand how we approach that and apply that to your own business, whether you're an agent or an agency owner. I think very probably insightful. So look for that coming up.
Yeah, and we've been pretty candid on sharing how we've grown and our different, like Dan's saying, our different models and our different agent types and diversification is proving to pan out, because what happens is when you have one aspect of your business or one sales channel that maybe underperforms, but another one kind of makes up that gap and overperforms, that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Is we basically had our known knowns that we could count on, and then some of our variables of things that we had been building, some of our long-term bets and things that we'd been building are really starting to pay off right now. And
and sometimes they were new this year that we stood up, and so we didn't have enough data and enough history to really understand how they were going to perform.
Yeah.
And now we do have a benchmark.
And it's interesting too with AEP, because you have all these agents who throughout the year we sit and pound the drum of, hey, you can be productive right now. You can write business, no matter what month of the year it is, but you still have this idea that they're saving up or they're going to really pace themselves for AEP. And that turns out to be true too. You have a lot of agents who have kind of organized their life, or they've,
they're creatures of habit though. They're classically conditioned. It's just what they're used to though.
Yeah. Right? Or they've sunset, they're like, oh, I'm going to quit my job and go all in on this during AEP because I know I can disproportionately be effective. Right. And so we every year we have what we call our dark horses, right? Where we have agents who were new, they were unknowns for us. And then they really start just, killing it during annual enrollment for us, turning into great agents. And every year, year over year, you start finding a couple of those dark horses and they turn into your consistent producers. And, those are really the ones that you can, rally around and build around, and they make a big difference in the business.
Yeah, I would agree.
So yeah, we'll start giving some love to some of those agents, but that's really panned out. Carriers that are winning so far, it's shaping up very similar to how we thought it would. Of course, it's seeming like United's always well positioned more than anything, and we'll talk about this probably in next week's episode, but with the way that the current overall landscape is in the industry, with MLRs being low and costs being high and hospital networks, we're seeing that these companies that have the vertical integrations that own the networks, and they've fared far better. And, United's the largest. They have a lot of those economies of scale. They have a lot of that infrastructure in place, and they're able to weather the ups and downs a little bit better. So we think United's doing great.
Well, they're also, I've mentioned it a lot. They're like the vacuum, right? Yep. Whenever anything is just out there kind of floating around, they're the one that kind of just sucks up the business, right? Where if you're in a marketplace where, let's say you have a broker who's not very
seasoned, not very savvy, and they're unsure of what products to sell, a lot of times they go to the path of least resistance of where the experience is easy, and they sell their products. If it's a marketplace where there's been a lot of disruption and, by plan design, by carrier exits, by a lot of the brokers who've been in the industry for a long time, like that's a safe harbor. That's like a place where they feel comfortable putting business because they feel like it's going to be secure, So it's like there's all these little elements that, that they have to their advantage, and that's why they win a lot of that business that's up for grabs. You know what I mean?
And
So.
United as a company never has to chase, right? They never have to go and disproportionately over-index on deploying dollars and buying the business, so to say, because they've already invested like-kind dollars into network, into structure, into these acquiring these businesses and things like that.
Yeah. But I would add though too, like when we talk about this, we're talking from like a national perspective,
macro level. Yeah.
Yeah, because I am going to have those people who comment and be like, "Oh yeah, well in my backyard they suck and they're not competitive and this hospital system's not in network." Sure, you're going to have like these outlier markets where that's the case, but I'm just generally speaking from what we're seeing from a national level. That's been our experience.
Yeah, for us, I think we're a little bit of an outlier nationwide because I think we're pretty much up across the board with every carrier.
Yep.
So it's hard for us. We know that's not the case with all the carriers. Some of them are having a down year, but where we've just been able to be strategic and go, hey, where can we win with these different carriers across the country, and then deploy resources and lead generation behind it. It's really paying off. But
I would say the only carrier that I would have to look at numbers that I would say I don't know if we're up is probably Aetna. I don't know. I'd have to look at the numbers. Maybe we are still up.
I still think we're up a little bit with Aetna, and that's with
a lot of it's with massive disruption everywhere. And let's be honest, they didn't come to the market heavy this year and say, "Hey, foot on the gas, we want to grow a ton." So
yeah. And Mom told me that Aetna's having some financial issues, so it was nice of her to look out for us.
Oh, really? Did she really?
Make sure we know what's going on in the industry.
That's funny.
But yeah, Aetna, they just moved on with their
CEO
Karen
Lynch.
And so I think there's some course correction there that's happening. And the other national carriers, I've thought Humana navigated a lot of their change and disruption this year. I think they're doing well. We're writing a lot of Humana business. I think they were able to kind of identify where they were unprofitable and kind of carve that off and have a good sales strategy to focus on those plans where they are profitable.
And I do think like we're always really transparent about everything. Like, we try to come to the market and hit you with the real. The one thing that I would say is we have a great partnership with Humana. We sell a lot of their products. Like you said, they've navigated it fairly well with very competitive benefits. The one thing that I do know are working on very closely, and it needs to be a big priority, is getting their star ratings up, because they were the one bigger carrier that was kind of, I think, caught with their pants down a little bit with those cut points, and didn't quite deliver where they wanted to with stars. And the only reason I say that matters is because that funding definitely impacts future plans, next year and the year after. So
yeah, I had this as a talking point on a podcast 2 weeks ago, but we didn't get to it much. But star ratings across the board were cut. And so we've seen a lot of these carriers pretty much universally, and that goes for everybody who's had historically good star ratings.
Even like in our backyard, Select Health is like a regional company. They kind of follow a Kaiser model or try to with owning the health system, with having kind of more of an integrated model. And they had a 5-star plan on both their HMO and PPO for years in a row. And they actually went all the way down to 4 stars on their HMO and 3.5 on their PPO. So they had a whole 1.5 change on their PPO, which is huge. When you're looking at some of these companies and you drop a 0.5 star, that's significant. But when you're talking a 1.5, and you're even lowering down past like the double star bonus, it's huge. And that's not like, I'm not calling them out specifically. That was just an example. But we've seen circumstances like that across the country with a lot of these carriers that moved significantly, not just a little.
Correct. Yeah, and there are lawsuits that are already happening and are in motion against CMS. It seems like There's a little bit of an over-aggressive sharpening of the pencil. It's interesting how all these things happen when the dollars get tight, right?
Yeah, well, and it's all the suits are happening too because again, you have to know like the rules that you're playing by, right? Like we talk about being like a vendor-supplier relationship with us and the role that we play in the supply chain, but then same thing with these carriers. Like the supplier in this case is CMS, right? And they're setting the rules, but it's always, you know, whether they're doing a great job articulating what their intentions are and what are the rules of the game and how they're going to be compensated, and were these companies properly notified of all these different cut points and how they were going to change it. And I think that's what's going to be, you know, at the crux of a lot of the lawsuits, you know, pretty much.
Yes, but, you know, even the carriers who have had across the board historically higher than average star ratings saw a pretty significant decrease down across the board over the past couple of weeks. And so, you know, why does that matter? Why does that matter for you as an agent? Why does that matter to the industry? Well, with everything else that we've been talking about, right, with the MLRs, the medical loss ratios, the funding environment, the increase in costs, it's really setting the stage for 2025 and 2026. Yep. For at least the next 2 years of a really difficult funding environment like we've been talking about. And so you do have less star ratings mean less reimbursement rates.
Yep.
Which means that the carriers need to get even a little bit more aggressive, you know, to try to become profitable. And so what's happening is you have this trickle down effect of less funding environment overall. And then, well, what do the carriers do? Well, of course, they look for cost saving measures too, and they want to be profitable and they want to make their nut. And so then they go and they're sharpening the pencil with their with the hospital systems, the doctors, the contracts, and then those same entities are also fighting for profitability.
Right.
And so basically, you're having the industry at large is fighting it out, knife fighting it out in the streets over very few dollars over the next couple of years.
Well, and you've probably heard that in the headlines. If you're listening and you're one of those people who subscribe to any of the healthcare or insurance, you know, online newspapers or sources or anything like, you're reading the headlines about hospital systems that are starting to reject Medicare Advantage plans altogether, or certain carriers or other things. And it's all coming down to those dollars, because especially if you're like a teaching hospital and you want to bill these higher rates and you're saying, hey, well, we're a teaching facility and we're going to bill X amount above what CMS even allows. Well, you know, and if you're an MA company, then you go, well, we're getting cut, and we know that you want higher rates, but we're not even getting those now that they've cut the reimbursement amounts. And not only have they cut the reimbursement amounts, but now, I mean, you've heard about all the headwinds we're talking about, you know, as far as, you know, stars, these cut points, everything else, there's just less dollars. So the MA companies can't afford to keep them in network. You're going to hear more of it, you know, as these hospital systems and as those arrangements start to come full term and they're back at the negotiating table, you're probably going to see more disruption in networks over the next 2 years.
Yeah, and what happens is there becomes a lot of political posturing and lobbying, and there becomes a lot of news cycle information and finger pointing that's happening, and we're seeing that right now. And one of the things we went through earlier this year, almost this vilification of the brokers and the distribution center, as if we're this problem that's that's taking a disproportionate share of these dollars in the system. And I think that, I don't want to say that fight's been won, but I think that most of the carriers realize that, you know, it's harder your problem gets even worse when you don't have sales and distribution, and you can't actually add members and things like that.
Well, and the other thing you can really look at this year too is, really, are they going to try to vilify that all the movement of people trying to call consumers and flip them and move them to plans for a commission? Are we really going to keep hanging our hat on the fact that, oh yeah, it's these brokers? Well, the brokers aren't the ones who did plan exits to 10%, or what was it, 13% of all Medicare Advantage plans
7% nationwide, but in some states like Georgia, it was 20%.
Right, and so it's like, oh yeah, people are moving and changing their plans. That for sure was because the brokers were trying to be aggressive and get them to switch. It's not.
Yeah, I feel like the brokers kind of saved the day a little bit, you know, and they're kind of the grease between the wheels of all this friction that's happening.
And that's not only that statistic only accounts for the plans that were completely sunset and went away. That doesn't really account for all the other plans where it's like, hey, look over here. We have this new H number with this new filing in that marketplace that is far more attractive. Here's this chronic plan over here. Enroll and sign up on this plan. And so, like, again, that's not the broker doing it. That's a consumer going to the marketplace being like, hey, how come you didn't enroll me on this plan that's way better over here? Well, that plan didn't exist last year. The insurance company just barely filed that to get a better reimbursement rate. Sure, I'll move you over there.
Well, we can talk about some of the dirty tricks. Some of the tricks that the carriers are playing this AEP that we've never seen before. But one of the things that I think needs to happen is if this year has not proved this out to you, maybe this annual enrollment will, but there are certain agents where you do need to be diversified, meaning you need to be an agent who, can you sell MA? Can you sell subs? Can you sell ancillary products? Do you have a diversification of your income sources? You definitely need to do that. You probably need to also be diversified in the carriers that you represent,
right,
and possibly even states or surrounding states, because for us, because of that diversification, we're having an incredible annual enrollment because we're able to capitalize on these opportunities. But there are a lot of you agents and agencies out there where you're spinning your wheels this AEP because you might be overly indexed on a lot of one carrier in particular. And if they had a SAR or something like that, you're having to work your guts out.
Or your business is one county or four counties, and it's very impacted.
And you're having to spend your entire annual enrollment just to try to stay flat, if not, try to just minimize the loss that you're going to take. And so, for you agents and agencies out there, think about that. The words I want you to focus on are diversification and sophistication, right? You need to be a more diverse, more sophisticated agent. And that is one of the things that I've liked about this year is it's forcing a lot of a lot of the agents who have no business being in this industry out of the industry. And even a lot of the companies and agencies that have been, riding the easy wave of fast, easy dollars,
right,
but weren't built on sound business principles or doing things the right way. They're all getting choked out of the industry in a more competitive environment. It's one of those things where, if you're structured the right way, these are good changes for you, and we're able to weather the storm and maximize because we're built the right way.
Yeah, and to your point, like here's a perfect example too. I am really okay with, the PNC agent who, essentially just gets appointed to sell their local Blue Cross Med Sup. And, 10 times a year when an actual client says, oh, I'm turning 65 and I'm going to have Medicare. Oh, yeah, I can help you with that. And they got their one product from their local Blue and they sell them an overpriced Med Sup. And that's about it. And then they have them call 1-800-Medicare for a PDP. I'm great with that kind of an agent, kind of getting forced out of the industry.
Yeah. Well, there's one thing that I've seen too is there has been a larger percentage of people that are getting cracked down and popped for fraud and non-compliance and things like that, because as you start having the finances and the crackdown happen, these people who are the bad actors and the outliers, they're going to continue to stand out, and then it's going to be easier to identify those people who aren't doing things the right way. So
it's true.
There's some definite good byproducts there, but
Let's talk. I don't know if we should shift yet, but I kind of want to talk about who we think is winning too a little bit. I know we discussed it. I would say that, we talked about United winning, which they have been. We talked about Humana doing better than we thought. Devoted is actually winning. And when we first shot our podcast, like early on in the year, they were poised to explode. They're still doing pretty good. I think they're going to grow 10 to 20% this year, I would guess. But definitely buffered back because they really revised their dental benefit specifically. Nationwide, that's been one of the biggest gripes, is that most agents and consumers said, like, hey, like the dental got, really nerfed. And so I think that's the one thing that, again, they have a great product. We really like them. Their care management's great. They're growing and doing well, just not to the level that we anticipated earlier on in the year with that change to the dental benefit.
Yeah, so. and I know that they kind of adapted to the way the new world is going to be. I think they realized, hey, we could really put the pedal to the metal this year, and we could double in size.
Right.
But if we double in size, is that smart? Is that strategic growth? Is that growth that we're going to be able to maintain?
Sustain, yeah.
Or is that going to hurt us down the road because we're not going to be able to sustain those things and those plans won't be profitable?
And I'm plan exiting in a year.
And so they decided to kind of future-proof their plans, knowing that they can maintain this level of benefits for the next couple of years instead of maybe being a little bit more aggressive. And so I think they're fine with that, knowing that, hey, they're playing a long game. They're going to be stable. They're going to keep doing what they're going to do. And so I think that, growth target is good for them. And Humana pretty much did the same thing too. They carved off a lot of those areas where they were not profitable, or it was going to be a little bit difficult. We've seen a lot of PPOs.
Yep.
It's interesting because that's where
86% or something of all of the
SARS
were PPOs.
Which, if you've been in the industry for 4 or 5 years, you really experience that proliferation of PPOs are more expensive, frankly, to file and operate. Yep. And so
the profitability's not there.
Correct. Yep. As the dollars were rich, through the COVID years, 2019 through 2022, PPOs were expanding, and just that became the norm, and that became the expected thing, was a really rich benefit PPO. And now that was basically, we're seeing a retraction of that across the board, where basically we're seeing, a lot of those rich PPO benefits being SAR'd.
Yeah,
so,
and then you have people online who are saying, and who have been in the healthcare space for a long time, and history repeats itself.
Mm-hmm. And so when the things course correct and get better again, we're going to, of course, that's what, if you're an MA supporter, what do you want? Well, you want a PPO, and you want it to be richer in benefits. So that's kind of the more Cadillac plan, but we are seeing a little bit more of a recession on those PDPs. And that's what a lot of the plans that Humana cut were some of those,
those PPOs, you mean,
that were hard to be profitable.
The other thing we haven't really mentioned, Mike, is I was surprised, at least, was not on my radar to have a banner year, and Anthem, Elevance. They were a surprise to us. I mean, talking to our broker distribution, some of these areas, it was literally what the hell? How have we written this much business for Elevance? It was a surprise. In particularly some big markets, like in Texas and Georgia,
Southeast.
Yeah. Some of these areas where they have phenomenal benefits, but also they carry a strong name to the consumer in a lot of those marketplaces, right? They have great brand awareness, consumers like them, and you add that kind of brand awareness and brand loyalty to great products and great benefits this year. They're doing great in a lot of these markets. I think from a systems and operation perspective, they've been a nightmare sometimes to deal with, but that's our experience on the FMO side. On the for the consumer though, who buys the product, they love it. And so we've seen our agents really
just kind of a finger in the air analysis of that, just kind of a reading the tea leaves, is especially on the DSNPs in the Southeast, anybody that was like a QMB plus, QMB or Anthem's benefits were really strong. And again, we've seen some of these carriers like the Humanas and Aetnas that hadn't historically been very experienced in the DSNP market, kind of taking their lumps with the funding cuts there. And an Anthem and a Molina and the WellCares in a lot of those markets are holding their benefits a little bit better, especially for those QMB plus benefits, because that was their bread and butter. They've kind of grown in those markets, so they were able to manage the plans a little bit better, I think.
Do we want to talk about the villains in the industry?
Well, we were talking about Anthem. One of the things that there's a couple of annoying gamification, or so we had all these SARs, right? And then we've been calling them the soft SARs, where they didn't full on want to exit these plans, but they didn't necessarily want to grow them either. And so we've seen a lot of what I would call, I'm not happy with, gamesmanship of some of these plans have done. Like some of the enrollment platforms, pretty much a lot of the carriers have suppressed plans.
Yes.
Meaning they've gone to Sunfire and these other carriers and said, hey, yes, this plan is available, but we don't want to make it easy for brokers to find this plan and enroll people, so suppress those.
But
So let's talk about why that's an issue for us, because I know it was a big heartburn for you and me.
It pisses me off big time because it puts me in a bad spot, because what happens is the consumers that go to Medicare.gov find it and quote it, and they're like, oh yeah, I want that plan. Well, then the broker does too, and they're like, well, why is this not showing up? And then of course we pay for our Sunfire, that tool, like we incur the costs as the FMO. And we have to manage that too. And we have to very meticulously spend a lot of time and resources to make sure that agents are licensed, contracted, appointed, ready to sell, their statuses are correct. And we have to go through daily and audit our NPNs and all of our producers and make sure that it's accurate. And the issue that I have with it is then it makes me look like a jackass. Like we're idiots. We don't know what we're doing. Our brokers think that we're screwing them or that we're incompetent. And so it's like, that's what makes me mad, because if you're the broker, you're like, oh, hey, I got this client in Iowa and hey, I want to enroll them in this. Why the hell is it not showing up? Why is it not in my Sunfire? And then they're calling our staff going, what the heck, you guys suck. Why can't you fix this for me? Why are you guys so stupid? And I'm having the same issue in Pennsylvania, and I'm having the same issue in Texas, and only 50% of the plans show up, and you guys are stupid. And so it's put that burden on us, like we're the problem, and it's really not. And there's not been a great explanation from the carriers, and none of them have really raised their hand to speak up and say, hey, don't shoot the messenger. It's not your FMO. It's actually us. None of them have really stepped up and talked about all the suppressing plans.
Yeah, and I don't blame Sunfire, just for the record, right? They're doing what their clients or contracted people have told them to do. But I almost don't think that should be allowed, where carriers can, you're offering a plan, it's commissionable, it's filed, and then you're disproportionately suppressing it because you don't want to grow. Those are the type of steering things that in theory, right, CMS has a problem with, right? Where you're going, well, you filed the plan. You said you're going to do benefits. Why are you allowing them to do that? I do not think things like that should be allowed. And then Anthem in particular took an extra step, and they did this really ridiculous thing where their PPOs, where they didn't SAR them, but they were taking them via paper apps only.
Yep.
Come on. I mean, that's just... You're just going to piss your agents off.
Yeah, they took it off of M-Producer. So what Mike's referring to is there was some carriers. So we actually had to create, actually walkthrough videos and resource guides, like an enrollment hierarchy for all the brokers, where it says, hey, go to, if it's not on Sunfire, then go look on cms.gov. If it's there on cms.gov and not on Sunfire, then it's probably on the suppression list.
Check their carrier
Then go to
tech,
the carrier tech, like if it's Humana, go try to use Vantage or Fast App and see if it's there. If it's United, go to Jarvis, see if it's there, or M-Producer for Anthem. Okay, so then some products would be available on the carrier's direct enrollment tool, and then others, like Anthem, like you're mentioning, was not. And then you had to go down the whole list to then paper applications, and then we're spending time, and guess what, to the chagrin of the broker or the carriers, guess what, we made all these how-to guides, and then we showed all the brokers, here's the number for support, you contact them, here's a link, download the app with a PDF, still write the business. But then the broker is downloading a PDF, sending it over to them, having them sign, processing paper applications again, and faxing it in, and we're going back in time 10 years. And it's going to, the other thing that I'll just say too is, because of that, I think it's going to allow for more non-compliance in the industry, which again,
it already did. We know that it has.
I was speaking in generalities. Yes. But then you're opening up for more non-compliance, and it's like, this isn't a solution and this isn't the way. So
yeah, so that's been very, very frustrating. And it's kind of like, look, you made your bed, you made your decisions, now lie in it. And it also forced a lot of, like Dan said, it's undone a lot of behavior that we've been trying to ingrain, best practices into brokers.
Curb. We've been trying to curb. And
over 5 years, it's like, hey, look, we have like Sunfire. It's an all-in-one platform. Go there, use it, be a source of truth, get adoption. Don't use paper apps. Well, and then it's like, oh, well, we don't really want to put all the plans in there, and they sometimes use a paper, and we're going to make this a pain in the butt. And then then the brokers go willy-nilly and go back to like, all right, well, I'll just check this carrier tech, or I'll check this website, and then it undoes a lot of the good habits and good practices that we've been working so hard to promote.
Yep. So I think that's one thing that we did want to kind of call out. Like I said, we've created a lot of, documents. Even lately, the other thing that we've been noticing too is a lot of uncertainty from distribution too about which carriers are paying HRAs or VBEs or other services and how much and on which product types. So the same thing, it's very sophisticated this year to where the same thing. We had to create a document that listed out all the different carriers, what HRAs or VBEs are available on which products, and go by how many days you even have to do it. Some carriers it's 48 hours. Sometimes it's 7 days. Some of them it's 90 days. Some of them it's $50, but it's only on SNP or DSNP or CSNPs. Others, it's all products. I mean, it's all over the board. So we had to create like a quick reference document for our broker distribution to know exactly where and what they should be doing on HRAs and VBEs, and another document on PDPs to say, here's all the carriers that are offering PDPs. Here's the ones that are paying renewals. Here's the ones that are paying new commissions on which levels and which tiers, not on their benchmark plan or not on that plan, but on these other ones.
Well, so. and the real issue that, we had is you already had a lot of fear and uncertainty with agents and mistrust because you had, WellCare not paying commissions on any of the PDPs going forward. And then you had a lot of the other carriers saying, hey, we're not paying new commissions on PDPs. And then each carrier came out with a larger list than normal of non-commissionable plans.
Right.
Well, then you have these plans that are suppressed and all this gamesmanship of not writing it. All it does is it makes the brokers distrust the carrier and wonder, oh my gosh, the industry is shifting towards this non-commissionable ecosystem. Why write this? Who can I write that I know is going to pay me? And with the plan suppression, it's like, well, is it suppressed? Am I going to get commissions on it? And so it just causes even more chaos. And my frustration is nobody warned us about that. None of the carriers came out to the FMOs and the partners and the agents and said, hey, we're going to do this, and this is why. And I always think, well, what would I have suggested differently, both to these, enrollment platforms and the carriers? And you should have your local brokers, communicating, hey, this plan's going to be around. It is commissionable, but it's not a growth plan, right? If you blow this up, it may not be there next year. That's not smart. Communicate, treat agents like they're adults, or, in the enrollment platforms, put like a note on there or something, be like commissionable, but not a growth plan.
But then you're steering again.
Well, so, yeah, it's better than it just not being there. So there's a couple of, things that really caused us issues, especially the first 3 or 4 days of AEP, till we could pretty much uniformly communicate out, hey, this isn't us. This is not a problem that we're causing by lack of updated statuses and things like that.
Well, here's the other thing that we didn't mention, just only because you started talking about distrust too, is of course, you are always going to hear from me on all my content that I put out. Value is a word that I use over and over and over about you need to be, if you're an agency owner, you need to be providing value to your agents. If you're an agent, you need to be providing value to your consumer. You need to be providing value to the insurance carrier, right? That's a word you're always going to hear me talking about. And I'm going to keep saying it. And the reason, because now there's more carriers coming out saying, hey, we are kind of talking to your member and trying to cross-sell your member. And that's another kind of element that I would say over the last couple of weeks that a few carriers have kind of started to, I wouldn't say they're hush, but like slow roll to the market and be a little bit more upfront that they are, in fact, in many circumstances, contacting your client that you place on their product, and that they are reaching out to them to either cross-sell them other add-on products or ancillaries, or walking them onto more suitable products too. So that's just something to very much be aware of, because as I see dollars continuing to get squeezed over the next few years, I see that increasing more. Just to throw that out there. I know you don't want to hear that if you're a broker, but plan on more of that. And I think that, again, creates more distrust with the broker community. So,
yeah, I mean, so overall, like, this is, of course, we're on this side and in favor of distribution and agents, and we're going to advocate for such. But what I'll say is, if these kind of behaviors and practices continue and we see even more people getting out of the industry or shifting their focus, it's like, well, when you need the agents and brokers to kind of do the work, you're going to have to compete for those resources again, even more so than you had before. It's going to be even more difficult for some of you. say, for example, a carrier who really mistreated FMOs and brokers, as things get good again, that, you know, the sun's shining bright and it's time to grow again, you're going to have a harder time competing for those resources because they've either exited the industry or they're more loyal to the people who treated them properly,
stuck with them through the tough times,
and built those relationships. And I can already tell you that is happening this year with the good entities and organizations that are efficient. They're able to produce business. They're able to do it and roll with the changes. Those type of entities are becoming increasingly scarce, and they're going to be more loyal to the partners that treated them properly and compensated them adequately all along the way. And there's going to be I don't know what other word to say, but dearth. Like there's going to be a lack of.
Look, I would, just add to that. People keep scores, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, agents, they keep scores of like, hey, that carrier screwed me X amount of years. I keep scores from 10, 13 years ago from carriers who really did us dirty, right? I mean, we keep scores and we keep receipts, and that impacts and affects behavior in the future. So to your point, when things turn back around, like we're already seeing in some ways, you know, I don't know if we should segue into like, you know, the capital markets yet, because we haven't talked about the industry villains, you know, and whenever I joke about the industry villains, I say WellCare. You know, they have been labeled as the industry villains because of the PDP commission, you know, debacle.
Yeah,
but
not for us though.
Not at all. But I'm just saying that
they're the opposite.
They're painted as the poster child of or the villain of the industry, and you know where it is, as we all knew though. They call it their PDP enrollments, not PDP sales. Mm-hmm. PDP enrollments are of course off the charts, and they're doing very well, and even their MA enrollments and their trend and trajectory is very well this year. So I mean, I do hate to be the bearer of the bad news to some of you who are kind of like, yeah, screw those guys. They're going to pay for what they did. I hate to tell you they're doing pretty well.
Well, I mean, that was never a big deal to us because enrolling people in PDPs has always been a charity thing in my mind. Honestly, it's been like
that's been part of your job, right?
That's, like if you really want to be a serious agent or business person, that's got to be an incremental sale portion of your revenue. That cannot be a serious component to your overall income. Otherwise, you kind of have a terrible business model, frankly. And yeah, I know there's people that have hundreds or thousands of supplement clients, and a big portion of those were PDPs, but it's still a fraction of that income. And you should, just like I talked about, being more diversified and being more sophisticated, you should have really taken that as an opportunity to just, hey, I'm going to get in front of those people, and I'm going to diversify. I'm going to make more income helping them with other things. And I'm going to, if I have to go do some PDP service work, I'm going to do it. I always did any PDP work in my mind, it was like, I'll just do this because I need to help this person.
Yeah,
I never cared about the micro commission anyway.
If they were on a PDP, you should have gone back out there and helped them enroll and choose a different PDP plan and talked to them about dental and talk to them about
critical illness
and whatever else. And you go to your 200 clients or your 50 clients that had it, and you know you make 12 sales out of your 50 clients. You make 12 dental or vision or hospital indemnity or critical illness or whatever plans. Don't force it down their throat. But I mean, obviously those ancillary or supplemental sales would have more than made up for the PDP revenue. But
yeah, to your point though, I think there's a lot of agents out there that are like, ha ha ha, we'll show those guys, and it's like, I don't think they weren't out there going, oh, you sure proved us wrong, necessarily this didn't pan out. Now whether that sentiment played a part of, was there like a boycott of MA plans and things like that? I guess we'll see how that pans out, but I think they're going to fare right on track with where they thought they were.
Yeah, their trajectory is
overall.
Good. Yeah, so. But yeah, let's talk too about the capital markets too. We've noticed a shift in the acquisition space, and we're already seeing that the Fed's dropped half a point. There's another half point scheduled, and a full point drop next year. At least that's the trajectory of the Fed.
Yeah, it's been a minute since we had to deal with getting things approved, so we don't want to say too much. But we've noticed in the past 3 weeks that there has definitely been an increased appetite for lenders wanting to lend money, capital markets, PE groups, that have money for the industry. And it definitely feels like a lot of money that has been sitting on the sideline
for about 2 years
is ready to be deployed again and grow in certain things regardless of what happens, right, with the E word.
And so I will also tell you that the reason I bring it up and it's a talking point is because you kind of saw like this big wave in like 2019 to 2022, a big wave of all these acquisitions and consolidations and everything from FMO distribution to carriers to provider groups and suppliers. And, anyways, I am just kind of bracing you all for a lot more of that because, again, the one thing too that the government has been fairly effective about, the antitrust rules have been they're good about like horizontal antitrust laws, but they're not good about vertical. And they've never done a good job in flagging those transactions. And so I'm just here to tell you that I think we're going to see another run here next year for these next 2 years and maybe a little bit beyond, more consolidation.
Yeah, I also think there's going to be, especially if one way happens, in the direction of the country, I think there's going to be a lot of investment into some of these alternative health models.
Yep.
And more of like wellness type things. And we're seeing a lot of investment and fundraisers into that ecosystem and into smaller, more boutique, managed care entities with healthcare, I think, that are going to take a more holistic approach to people's health. I think there's going to be major investment and moving of healthcare that way over the next 2 years as well. And that's going to function two reasons, right? There's going to be money that's going to go that way. But if you're a company and you want to make profit and you're seeing this current healthcare ecosystem operating and there just isn't the dollars that there were, well, you can then make an alternative model that's going to be profitable by actually getting people healthier, and you're going to save money for the carriers that way. And there's going to be a big land rush of, almost kind of an alternative healthcare model springing up. I think we're going to see over the next couple of years.
Kind of like what we saw in, let's just call it like the Papa Pals, the Helper Bees, the kind of like all those other services, the food delivery that are kind of all popped up again to the 2019 to 2022 kind of years. I think we're going to see that little pop up, like a whole little segment.
The health tech and the health and the wellness space as a counterpunch to some of the traditional models, because the traditional model is just everybody's struggling to be profitable. And as the dollars are lean, there's going to be different ways that spring up to try to capture those
people
dollars.
Are going to be willing to roll the dice on it because the whole, like what we're doing is not working.
Correct.
Kind of an idea.
Yeah, well, exactly. If you're a carrier and you've got a fixed amount of dollars coming in, how do you make more spread? Well, if you can save more of the expenditures by doing these different things, then you're going to – so I think there's going to be a major swing in investment into that thing over the next couple of years.
Yeah,
that space.
Internal. There's also been more intensified talks, like springing back up of even a Humana Cigna acquisition, or a Cigna Humana acquisition, I should say. Those have kind of resparked and rekindled a little bit. So, like I said, I am looking.
I think Cigna's doing well this year, better than we anticipated. Than I think the market anticipated with enrollments. We are seeing that.
Yep. So there's that kind of rekindling a little bit too in the marketplace. So again, more of, I guess I would call it the same. So if it's good and bad. I mean, I think from our perspective, the one thing that has always been a huge pain point for us has been all the little Blue Cross Blue Shields everywhere. Like, oh, there's Regents in this area, there's Blue Cross in that, there's multiple Blues in one state. They're behind the times as far as like technology and enrollment tools and offerings, and they're all like their own little independent. If you were to add them all up, along with Elevance, all the Blues, it's significant, and they're a huge player, top 4 or 5, if you were to roll them all up into one entity. But because they're all fragmented, even like ones where we have a contract, like we do have like a Blue Cross in North Carolina, Blue Cross of Florida or Florida Blue. We had
an ACA.
Yeah, we have the HCSC. I mean, we have a lot of these contracts, but then to contract a broker for, let's say, Montana it's one contract, and then you have to contract them for Illinois, and then you contract them for Texas or wherever, and it's a different writing number in every one of the 5 states in the footprint. I mean, just stuff like that. It's really painful and excruciating to try to do business with all these, tiny little entities. So
yeah, and I bet there will be, some more consolidation and rolling up, and we know there will be in the very near future.
Either
we're already hearing one of the carriers is back into acquisition mode, right?
Carriers are into acquisition mode. You already have a lot of these carriers, right? Even this year, who are just saying, we're not going to do it anymore. We're going to stick to commercial. We're going to stick to individual products. We're not going to do Medicare. We've already seen some of those carriers just tap out and go, we're not going to do it anymore. And I think there's more of those on the bubble that are maybe good candidates to be acquired. Rather than tapping out and just closing down the product line, they're willing to sell off their business, and somebody else is going to be really happy to pay pennies on the dollar for it. Yep. So, Molina did the same thing with Bright, with Central Health Plans, with some of those assets, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that too.
Yeah. I think that's kind of a good place to wrap for today. I think the next episode will be probably more ACA focused as we get into OEP for ACA. We've got our kickoff next week for open enrollment, and I'm optimistic about the changes that we've seen for ACA, and I think we'll do a full ACA focused one, kind of like some of the changes how Sherpa's rolled out and things like that next week.
Yeah, it's really easy to go from complete and total and utter shit show to better. I mean, there wasn't really...
From absolute... He's not talking about Health Sherpa necessarily. He's talking about like the whole industry.
The ACA marketplace.
Going from the wild, wild west to a complete fraudulent chaos to overcorrecting to now it's...
Well, yeah. I mean, it
is interesting that all the things that we thought were going to happen in 2 to 3 years actually happened in 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, and it was... so there's kind of nowhere to go but up, from where it was,
So we're back, excited about ACA, and we're a great partner to work with on that. So, more news to come.
All right, y'all.
Thanks, guys.
Catch up to you next week.
Agent